having friends and just seeing opportunities. I think this is what a lot of people miss in life. There are opportunities all around you every day to solve a problem for you. But most people miss it. It goes whoosh. Because, as Tony Robbins says, you haven't activated your reticular activation system and you're not looking for those opportunities. You're looking for the perfect opportunity.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Levelin Up podcast with Brigham Blackham. I'm so grateful to have my good friend Hugh Zaretsky. Man, this is someone that I have been connected with for over 5 years, and someone that I absolutely know is one of the best in real estate investing. He understands the ins and outs. He's got an amazing book called The Launch Button, and we're going to be talking about how to press the launch button on your business so that you're not just thinking about all these different things. You're not just hypothetically doing real estate, but you can really get in and know what needs to happen on a day-to-day basis to be successful. So welcome to the podcast, Hugh. How you doing?
I'm awesome. How about you, Brigham?
I'm so good, man. This is great to have you. So tell us, for those people that have never heard of you before, why do they need to listen to you? I mean, you've got such a list of like amazing accomplishments in real estate. I was like, I don't even know where to start because you've done so much.
Yeah. So, look, one of the things is it just takes a little bit of time to put in some time, energy, and effort to get where you want to be. And then it's just that consistent daily action that leads to success. So my background is I can't spell or do grammar, right? And grew up with teachers as parents and was pushed into the corporate world at a very young age. Went into computers and followed that path all the way through. And then a little day called 9/11 happened where both planes flew directly past my window into the Twin Towers. And I was one of the first people to take pictures of the scene that day that went out to every major newspaper. Now, that's the day that changed my life, because at that point I was making more money than my parents combined, right? I had the apartment, I just moved in New York City 10 days before with a pool on the roof and all of the great things that are associated with that. And yet I realized after that day, I wasn't happy. I want to thank all of our military veterans and first responders here that are listening to this podcast, because you've seen things way worse than I did. But unfortunately, there's some trauma in our lives. There's something that's happened in our lives that made us stop what we're doing and be like, am I really happy doing this, right? And for most people, they're not. And unfortunately, they're stuck at their jobs, or they're stuck at whatever they happen to be doing, either because of ego, because of financial needs, or one of those other ways of going about getting sort of stuck in life, right? And we don't want that to be you. So you can learn from me and go ahead and say, okay, here's how I changed, and here's how you can change too. And it just takes a bit of courage, right? The difference between confidence and courage is taking the steps without knowing what the outcome's going to be. But if you take some consistent action each and every day, you can get there. And so that's what I did. I took a boot camp. I learned how to be a real estate investor, public speaker. We were already investing in real estate. I learned how to be a public speaker. And then I had the opportunity to fly around the country, teach and train investors. And I made more money on the weekends teaching people how to invest than I did at my IT job. So I fired my boss in 2005. I've been a full-time real estate investor ever since. We started with, the precursor to Airbnb, even before it happened, right? That's how we got started in real estate, and then have done just about every real estate strategy since then, and continue to work with investors all across the country and Canada.
Yeah, I love that. Now, one of the things I think is really impressive about you is you haven't just made millions. You've been able to help people fire their bosses, and not just once or twice. How many people have you actually, because I know you have it documented, how many people have you been able to help fire their boss and become a real estate investor?
Well, it's not just become a real estate investor. It's like whatever they want to do, right?
Yeah,
it could be a business owner, it could be an entrepreneur. It's finding that passion and be able to do that. We've helped thousands of people in multiple different organizations that I've spoken for, just be able to do that. And it's not like a churn and burn. A lot of people like yourself, I've known for over 5 years, like we're still here, we still connect. We got to hang out with your wife this last time, so that was awesome. But we stay in touch. So I've got people I've been working with for 10, 11 years, right? And it's just, they get started and then we just keep doing businesses together and different opportunities as you grow and scale. So I don't have an exact number on that, but we got lots of great testimonials for people. And some people don't like to tell us, right? Like they're just like, hey, they do it and they go off on their own. So, but we've trained over 10,000 investors. I think it's more like 12,500 investors between the different organizations and entrepreneurs that want to go out there and make a change in their life.
And I'm like eternally grateful for the things you taught me, because now I know how to do short-term rentals at such a high level. And you were one of the few people that was living, breathing proof that strategy worked. And I was like, well, if he can do it, I want to try it, and I want to do it. And then I went out and I took action. I was like, oh, I can do this. Like one of my favorite little things that you said from that class was like, just drop a pin on it. I love that concept of, hey, if you can figure out and pinpoint the things that will bring people to the area, and you can say, hey, within this 1 or 2 mile area, why do people come here? Why do they already do it? Like that mindset was so helpful. Do you want to elaborate on that? Like, give me like 30 seconds of like,
sure.
What that
So yeah, so when we call it drop a pin on it, right? And
yeah.
Now it's very common, but when you first went through this, pre-COVID and everything like that, it wasn't as common. But you just go to Google Maps, you drop a pin on the city, the location, or the property that you're thinking about buying, and seeing what's in the area. And the biggest mistake that most people make is, if we use Disney, Orlando, Florida as that example, people are like, well, I'm in Orlando, so it's a great place to rent out for Disney people. And yet most of the time it's not, because you're too far away, right? You're too far away. Even though you're still in the city of Orlando, there's hundreds and thousands of hotel rooms and everything for that. And yes, you can say, hey, you're close to Disney, but that probably wouldn't be your primary thing. There might be SeaWorld closer to you. There might be a golf course closer to you. There might be schools closer, colleges closer to you, maybe some football games, baseball games, whatever it happens to be closer. And that's really what you should advertise for. So we really break down on what you should advertise for and attract to your property to get the most bookings, right? I was just working with a guy yesterday and going through his photos, and it was like, sometimes our spouses get and significant others get involved in it, and don't do their photos of their living room. There's like 9 pictures of like Christmas ornaments and like super close up, like this is the ornament. And I was like, yeah, like right up there, like here's Rudolph, right? It's like, okay. When somebody's going through a listing, they're not like, let me see 9 pictures of ornaments. I'm like, I would click off your list and I'd be like, all right, I'm out. Like, I'm not booking that property, because I'm going through your top 9 pictures, and a bunch of them are that, right? So there's these little tips and tricks of making sure that, you get the outcome that you want.
I love that. And really being conscientious of, is this helping tell the story of them being in the unit? I think right. So many little tips and tricks that you shared on photographs and on attracting people to your listing and being intentional with what you have as far as amenities. So helpful in so many different ways. So thank you for those trainings. I've been going through them for years, and I appreciate you. So
and I appreciate you. But here's one funny story on that. One of our properties, I think it was a year before we actually put a picture of the front of the house. Like a year later, somebody's like, hey, we're here and we're not sure what the house looks like, even though there's like big numbers on the mailbox and stuff like that. But the front of the house made it look super ordinary. It made it look like, but the back of the house was on a canal. We had all the sunset pictures, you sitting by the pool, all of these things, right? And like, so like a lot of times the first picture on a lot of people's Airbnb listings is like the front of their house. And it's like, okay, unless that's a cool shot, you don't need it, right? Like people, like for a year, people found our property. We didn't have a picture of the front of the house or even what it looked like. And I was like, oh, okay, we definitely should add that. But we added that as like the last picture. So when you're driving up, here's what it is. But we did have big numbers on the mailbox, so people found it for over a year. They just, one person was just maybe like, what does it look like? And it was like, oh, that's a good reminder. So you don't necessarily need a picture of your property, the house, if it's not sets it apart, but the view is what sets it apart.
Yeah, there's like a money shot is one of the ways that I hear this. If you don't have a good money,
that's what we talked about in the training, right? We call it the money shot. What's that money shot? The money shot was the sunset on the canal. You're sitting by the pool, like looking out from the pool to the canal, right? Everybody's like, I'll go there. Like that's all you got to see.
Exactly. Yep. And if it doesn't make them stop and click, then you're not actually going to have a reservation with those people. So you have to figure out what is the best story, and that's how you organize your photos. So I would love to dive in. How did you come up with this concept of the launch button? Because it's brilliant, but I feel like brilliance often takes decades to compress into days. So tell us how you came up with the concept.
Yeah, there's a quote out there from Albert Einstein that says, make things simple, but not simpler. And great trainers, experienced people can make things really simple. And, and that's what we did with this. And it did take decades. I started writing this book back in like 2007, 2008, because I knew I wanted to tell my 9/11 story, but I also made it a workbook format. Right. So there's actually in the book, and you guys can get it off Amazon, right? In the book itself, there's actually exercises. So we also have pictures, quotes, exercises, because we know people learn all different ways. And this is one of the things I teach like at our public speaking courses, right? Is that there's different types of learners. So you'll see that there's questions and things like this with that workbook style. But originally it was like, fire your boss. That's where we were going with this. And then funny enough, sometimes you can't trust your students, because I said that at a training. I was like, oh, I'm writing the book, like I'm good, the book to go ahead and fire your boss and all these things. And somebody went ahead and took that title.
Oh,
so you're faced like that, right? Like I'm literally like, hey, this is gonna be the name of my book, don't do it. And then somebody's like, oh, I'll just copy that. I'll just take that because I delayed. That was my fault. I procrastinated. I didn't put the book out there because, as I said, I'm not a good speller and I don't do grammar well. Even though my mom was an English teacher, my dad was a math teacher. I followed after my dad. And so, but, right, the funny thing that comes out of that is, so we're going through this and I'm working with my editor. I was like, oh, here's the title. And then I double checked it. I was like, oh, and I looked at the name on the book and I'm like, oh, that's one of my students. And I was like, that's just messed up. We're from New York. So, we put a little cement shoes on those types of people, right? And we use the F word, and I know you don't, so I'm going to refrain from that. We're just going to say, they F things up there. So I was like, all right, but it led to a better title, right? The launch button. Simply like, these are the things we got to do before we take off. And we use the analogy of a rocket ship. In a rocket ship, there's stage 0, that's the prep stage, stage 1, and then staying in orbit is stage 2. And what most people are in that prep stage, but they often don't hit the launch button to launch out. And then you got the easy button from like Staples. So like, it's a good analogy of like, hit that launch button, right? Let's get off the ground. Because that is the hardest part. The hardest part of a rocket launch is the first foot. Because all that inertia to get off the ground, to fight gravity, to fight all the negative people in your life, fight all the limited beliefs, right? That is the hardest part, is just to launch and get a foot off the ground. Sometimes you get a foot off the ground and you come crashing back down. Sometimes you get a little further and you go, right? But eventually you're going. Now, here's the crazy thing. Once a rocket's in orbit, it doesn't take that much to stay. It might be just like a little, we've all watched the space movies, right? Where you just hit the button like one time and all of a sudden it changes course, right? Yeah. So I think, what was it? The Martian with like Matt Damon, where he's stuck on the planet and they're like flying towards each other. And it's like a little touch, right? Sends you a long way. And that's the thing. Once you're in orbit, it's easy to stay in orbit, but it's getting off the ground. That's the hard part. So we lay out all the things to do before you fire your boss, before you leave your job. Because a lot of people out there are like, go fire your boss tomorrow. I'm like, no, wait. There's lots of things that you need to do before you do that. So we got a whole chat list of things to go through and do that.
I love it.
For that, So and that's where it came from. It was literally just we came up with a rocket analogy, and then it was like, all right, let's just like the easy button. Let's just hit the launch button. And it was like, oh, that's even better than fire your boss. There's a whole bunch of books out there that titles like Fire the Boss. And so there we go.
I love it. And there's like this ignition point, this launch. So it's almost like that choice of, hey, this is what is happening. What do I need to do before I press that? And I just love the visual as well as the practical preparation that you're putting into it. So if you could say, like, one of the things you learned from writing this book, what would be something that you're like, man, this was such a great takeaway for me? Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a couple things, because anytime we do something, whether it's you're launching your podcast, somebody's launching their business, it's these 6 inches that like mess us up so bad. Like, oh, why are you doing this? Oh, you can't do that, right? And my story, and I said it several times, is here I can't do grammar or I couldn't spell, or do grammar. And so that was a thing holding me back. I first went to write this book in 2007, 2008. I hired a ghostwriter. I paid him thousands of dollars to write it, and it was coming out in the wrong voice. And I was like, that's it. Real estate market crashed. I was like, that's a sign to stop what we're doing. And then I finally had to write it and do what I teach my students, which was I had to sit down and do what we call CDA, consistent daily action.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if it's 15 minutes a day. It doesn't matter if it's an hour a day. Whatever time you have towards your goal, you have to put that in. And it should be roughly the same time, right? So if it's like you get up in the morning and that's your free time, I know you got kids, so sometimes it's not the best time. Maybe they go off to school and then you do that. But every day you spend 15 minutes on that and writing the book.
Yeah.
And so it used to take me 2 hours to write an email to my team. And then there would still be spelling mistakes, and I like just a one-page email, right? Still be spelling mistakes and all these things. And people would reply back to me, you spelled that wrong. I was like, well, if you know I spelled it wrong, then you know what it meant. Like, that's how I was, right? And so now here I am going to write a book, and the book's decently sized, right? It's not like and I end up writing 80,000 words, and you only need, the max is 60,000 for a book. So because I gave myself permission and I did the CDA, all of a sudden I exploded way past, right, what was required for a book. And all of a sudden I had like 2 books. And now again, my brain kicked in and went, oh, how are you going to cut out all those words? Because now I got to cut out like 20,000 or 30,000 words out of it. Right.
Yeah.
So that was the lesson, was just do the CDA, right? Spend the time. And once I gave myself permission, it just flowed. Like I would be on airplanes and I would write for, I don't like to write. I'd be writing for like 3 hours on the plane, typing it all out, like all the stories, all of the things.
I love that. And that constant daily action that you brought up, like that's such a helpful and simple thing. Like when my wife and I were in Detroit with you this last 2 weeks ago or whatever, we had like multiple breakthroughs. Or like, we don't have to do 50 things on one to-do list. Like we can say, what are the 3 things that will help us consistently get to where we want to go? And I was like, if we consistently did those daily actions, would we get the results that we want? I was like, yes. Then let's just do those 1, 2, or 3 things. And I love how simple that is. But it's kind of like what you said with Einstein. Like if you simplify too much, then you miss the point. But when you simplify to the point that it's actionable and people understand it and they do something with it, then your trainings, whatever it is that you share, will positively impact them forever. So tell me this, when you came up with how you started real estate investing and you started coming up with Airbnb, I know it wasn't called Airbnb at the very beginning, but when you came up with that concept, how did you recognize that this was not just like, hey, I'm getting my room clean, this is nice, to, man, this is a really viable exit strategy for real estate? When did you have that shift?
So there's 2 times, right? So we'll go the precursor of Airbnb. I just went to a wedding. Like I went to a friend's wedding, college friend's wedding, and we're staying at this hotel. And I tell a little bit of the story in there, and I won't name names because there was a lot of shenanigans that happened. Like we were playing jokes on each other and all these things. But like I was a single guy. I didn't have a date at that wedding. My buddy also didn't have a date at the wedding, my college friend, Mike. And then my other college friend, Jeff, was there with his girlfriend at the time. And we all stayed at the same motel, right? It was an outdoor motel. And I ended up with a king size bed in mine. Mike had like a queen, and Christine and Jeff had like a double size bed, right? Like of all the things, right? Just randomly like this. So we're like getting ready to go to the welcome dinner or whatever, like the night before the wedding, and we're talking about the hotel rooms, and they're like, and every room is decorated completely differently. Like mine was like a seashell scene, and we were right by the beach. Somebody else's was like pink, somebody else's was green. I was like, so when they're telling me this, actually, I forget, we went down to the front desk to find out where to go somewhere. And I was like, asking the clerk, I was like, I don't understand this. Isn't this a hotel, like a motel? Like, why are the rooms all different? Why are they all different sizes? And he's like, well, these are what are called condotels. And I was like, what's that? He's like, well, the owners actually own them and they can decorate them however they want. And then we rent them out when they're not using them. Sounds a lot like Airbnb, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
but Airbnb wasn't invented at this time. This is 2005. Airbnb didn't come out to like 2010, 2012. And I was like, that sounds interesting. You know, like you could actually, and I was like, and we started researching properties, me and my friend Jeff. And by the way, we didn't let them switch. They had to stay in the double bed, and we all stayed with the king and queens. So just to mess with them. And we started researching it, and then we started finding $60,000 condo rooms on the ocean front. And that's how we got started. And we're like, coming from New York City, where everything's like at that time 400,000, and you can buy a $60,000 condo on the ocean, and they'll rent it out for you, right? Like, and it was crazy percentages they take. Now that looking back, it was like 50% that they would take as management, which is crazy.
Wow.
Right. But at that time, we didn't, there was no Airbnb. Nobody knew about it. Not many people knew about this. So we started investing in that. We'd sold before the market crashed in 2008, 2010. We'd be multimillionaires, but that was a good learning lesson for us, right? But I kicked off my real estate investing career, made me take that boot camp. And I have another rule that says 78% of what you want, you do it. That led to me then firing my boss, and that started the whole journey, right? So there's always ups and downs as the entrepreneur. And so we'd done that, gotten out of that space, and then I was traveling, and a really wealthy buddy of mine said, "Hey, you travel a lot." And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What if I clean your apartment, rent it out, clean it again, and give you a check when you get back from traveling?"
Right.
I was like, I have a spare bedroom, like we'll rent out your spare bedroom, all that. And I was like, you had me to clean my apartment, right? Like, was that like that movie, right? Like you had me to clean my apartment for free. Like once, every time I travel, you're to clean my apartment. I don't have to do it. I don't have to pay anybody. I was like, sure. And then we ran a test, and he had multi-million-dollar properties. And then he had mine, which was, $500,000, $800,000 property. Theirs are like full floors, all these things, and yet mine was getting booked out at a higher rate than theirs, even though they were nicer apartments, right? Nicer amenities, all of these things. So we were running tests on why was that happening. That was just when Airbnb was starting. And so we got involved in that at that time, and the rest is sort of history. So again, it's having friends and just seeing opportunities. I think this is what a lot of people miss in life. There are opportunities all around you every day to solve a problem for you. But most people miss it. It goes whoosh. Because, as Tony Robbins says, you haven't activated your reticular activation system, and you're not looking for those opportunities. You're looking for the perfect opportunity. And it's not going to come. That's that 70 to 80% golden rule that I have. That 70, 80% of what you want, say yes, because most people go, oh, it is, but it's not the best time. Oh, it is, but this, right? And then they don't do it. And that's the red car principle, which is you drive to work, and how many red cars did you pass? You don't know. But if it was like you get paid $1,000 for every red car, you'd see all the red cars. And that's the same thing with opportunities. They're coming.
Yeah, and then you start driving through the parking lots, like, how do I find more red cars?
Yeah, exactly, right? Like
red car.
But it doesn't work that way. Like the idea comes, and you got to be open to it to see where it's coming from.
Exactly. That effective filter, it's something that the more knowledge you have, the more tuned into opportunity you can be.
Right.
And I love how when you really understand what opportunity looks like for you, and you've kind of narrowed your buy box and say, this is what I'm looking for, suddenly you'll start to see those opportunities. But if you're looking for everything, eventually you'll find nothing. Yes, it's not specific enough.
You just start chasing. It's like squirrel. You start chasing the different things, and you miss it. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you could give advice to yourself, or like encouragement to yourself as a brand new investor, a brand new business owner, what would be something that you would say, hey, younger Hugh, like young Hugh, you just do this and things are going to be way better. What advice would you give yourself?
So it's finding out, like, what are those 3 key things that you should do each day to grow that business, grow that idea, right? So if it's real estate, it's, we do this training, it's find a deal in 6 minutes. You literally can find real estate deals in 6 minutes. I have people all the time doing it. They find anywhere from 1 to like 20, right? Once you understand this, you just need like 3 pieces of data and take the action, right? So the 3 pieces of data is where you're looking for, what type of property, what are some keywords, and a website, right? You can search on anything and you go do it, right? But the problem is, like you said, everybody is too broad. Like, hey, I want a property in Florida. Cool. But that's not helpful because that's not really, you don't get to know the area. So we call it farming, getting to know a specific area, specific town, or even a specific zip code. You can get that. So, but that's more real estate. But in business, it's finding those three things. It might be, hey, I need to learn how to build a website. So you spend 15 minutes a day watching a YouTube video to learn a website, or you buy a training program, right? I'm big on putting the investment in because we don't value things that are free.
No, we don't.
Right? Let me say that again. We don't value things that are free. We're like, oh yeah, then I'll just do it later if it's a free thing. Like we were just running a free CE credit for real estate agents. Right now, normally it costs them $50 or $60 to get a CE credit. This one was free. And all they had to do, we sent them a confirmation in there, was like, enter your license number. And so we can get the certificates traded for you. We had like 15 people that registered for it. And you know how many actually put their license number in on that second link?
I don't know.
0. So we had to cancel. We had to cancel the class, right? I literally had to send out text messages the morning before, and like one person went in and did it. I was like, ASAP, you got to do this. And one person was like doing it, and then the instructor was like, I only got one person registered. It's not worth it for me to travel in and give the class. I was like, this was free for you. All you had to do, and people opened the email, like it says, 10 out of 15 people opened the email, so pretty much everybody saw it where it said click here to, you know, enter your license number, and they just didn't take the action. And that's what happens when it's free. Now, if you paid $1,000 or $10,000 for it, if you paid 10 grand for it, you're like opening that email.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
you're
like here's your free training.
Where's my training? No, that's so true. Because when you pay for something, you pay attention. And one of the things that increases the value of a product is how much you pay for it. And your perceived value goes up because of that. It might be the same information, but you'll use it slightly differently because you actually invested into your mind. So in the launch button, in your career, I know you've had a lot of ups and downs. What, if you could say, like, has helped you the most as a speaker? Because I know you've been speaking and training for like over a decade. You're fantastic at it. But what has been one of those things you're like, this is very helpful as a speaker to improve? So let's start there.
So here's the golden key. Nobody knows what you're supposed to say.
Yes. So true. So true.
Right. And so everybody, like, you know, we talk about this, and we're running a speakers boot camp in like London, so you guys can come with us. I'd make sure Brigham has the link for you guys. Like, you know, it's Express with Impact, www.expresswithimpact.com. We're going to run one in London in September, and then New York in November. And the thing that everybody says when they like, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to forget what to say. I'm going to do all these things, right? And, you know, Warren Buffett says the one skill you can learn to 50% increase your value is public speaking. Yet more people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy, right? And that is the fear, right? Because I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to do this. Because everybody's like, I'm going to say the wrong thing. But here's the thing. Nobody knows what you're supposed to say. Except you. Right. So you watch it all the time. Like I watch all these speakers get in their heads and they're like, mess that up. I'm like, but don't admit it. And that's the other thing that speakers do all the time. They're like, oh, I messed that up, especially young speakers. Like, oh, I messed that up. Now you told the whole audience you messed it up, versus like, oh, hey, let me go back and just add this, right? Let me just go do that. So that's the hardest thing to get people to understand, because they're like, oh, you know, I work with people on their stories, because if we can't connect on their stories in the first like 30 seconds, you lose the audience, right? You lose the audience. So we got to make sure that we connect with them. We got to make sure we do those things, but they get all stuck on the words and what they're supposed to say. So that is the key. I keep going to the whole training on how we do that, but that is the key right there. Nobody knows what you're supposed to say. Even like if you're doing the same presentation every week, every day, and you know you have your one role, nobody knows exactly what you're supposed to say. So like people may tease you afterwards, you didn't say this, but the audience doesn't know, right? That's what changes. The audience changes. Not often do you change your talk, but the audience changes.
And this is something my friend Daniel Hess taught me when I was a professional actor. He's like, give a gift to your audience. This might be the first and only time they ever hear you. So why not do your very best to connect with them, give them an opportunity to hear you and to hear what your story is. And sometimes in the middle of your speech, you'll be like, I have an idea that I think might actually land better with this audience than I even had prepared. So do you have
But you can only do that if
Yeah,
you're
go ahead.
not thinking, and you can only do that if you're not thinking, like overthinking in your brain, right? You can
Right.
only, and that's what it is. It's being present. So if I'm not worried about saying the wrong thing, I can actually be present and have that conversation and watch people's faces and see the reactions. And that's where you get that idea. Oh, this isn't going so well. I need to pivot here. Like they're more about this. Like sometimes I did a talk for a group. It was a little weird for me because the marketing was like, you had to be this age, between this age and this age, which I'm like, real estate investments for everybody. But you had to be between this age and this age. And it was like real estate investing, motivational training. And I think it was a little bit of like the dating scene, right? Like that's why it was age limited, right? So it was like
Yeah.
3 different groups in that audience. I was like, this is really, it should have just been like anybody wants to learn real estate investing or anybody wants to learn, you know, the launch button, how to fire your boss. So I was getting all different questions from different groups. So it was like, how do I tie it all together for all three? So I had to like lower it for some people to be like, hey, you guys want straight real estate training. You're going to come to the event on Thursday. We're going to do high level real estate training there. You want to do this, you go here, right? And so those are the types of things that you can read from the audience if you're present. And that's the second part of it, right? If you're not worried about what to say, you can be present and you can see those things, you know, and that's just the second step. And that's what your friend Daniel was telling you, right? It was like, hey, if you're present and you're watching the faces, like, okay, you can pivot and shift.
And that's part of being a speaker, I think, is even if like the story that you said still fits here, if there's ways you can tailor it to that specific audience because of the way they reacted, that shows you're more prepared. That like you have to have preparation, but if you're prepared, then you can slightly go off script and come back, because that brings your audience in. So Hugh, if you could say like one call to action or one thing that you're like, this will make the biggest impact in somebody's life as a business owner, what would be that one thing that you'd say, this is something that has helped me, it's helped others, that pattern of progress, to say, this is that one linchpin that if you do that consistently will change everything? What would that be?
So what, like, because I do so many different businesses, it's a little hard. So I'm trying to like pull it back in. One of the things I think that is the hardest thing is to move in the morning. Okay. Because from a neuroscience perspective, and I did a little PT during COVID and all that, got into some neuroscience and stuff like that. Like when we wake up in the morning, the reason a lot of people have depression and stuff like that is they stay in bed. And when we wake up in the morning, right, we still wake up with a 2,000-year-old crocodile brain. Like you can read all the studies. I don't care if you want to Joe Dispenza, whatever it is. Like there's all these studies out there from Joe, who's a little far out there, to like true scientists. But we wake up with all that cortisol pulsing through our body as if we're going to be eaten by a saber-tooth tiger, right? Like that's what it is. You wake up and they're like, oh, am I going to get eaten, right? And so that is one of the things. So just moving and changing the chemicals in your body will get your day started. 2, back in that caveman, cavewoman days, if you stepped outside of the group, you were in essence killed. You were eventually eaten by that saber-tooth tiger. You had to stay in the community, right? So everybody was super afraid about, pissing off the other community members, upsetting somebody, and being like ostracized, right, and kicked out.
Okay.
As entrepreneurs today, you got to do the opposite. You got to be willing to get ostracized from your friends, to raise your level up. Everybody talks about leveling up and 10x and all those things. Well, that means you got to leave all these other people behind. But now your brain's going, oh no, I'm part of this social circle. I got to stay here, right? I'm going to lose all my friends. I'm going to lose all my family. And that's the hardest thing, is to break that. So 1 is to move. And then 2 is to understand when your brain starts freaking out about doing that you got to get new friends and new things like that. I had a story recently. I was listening to the book, 10x is easier than 2x, and talks about a guy that was a smoker, right? Yeah. And the guy sent him to he's like, hey, do you want to stop smoking? He's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, I'll pay for your treatment. Go to this place. I know it's helped millions of people. But when he came back, he lost all of his friends because they were all smokers. And so either he eventually left because he was feeling all this. They didn't want to hear about how to quit smoking because they're diehard smokers, right? And so we all have those groups, whether it's smokers, whether it's being lazy, whether it's like whatever it is, we have those groups that sort of are like us where we are, and we've got to break free into the new groups.
I love that. One of the things that I really love about our community is you have so many people that are wanting and encouraging you to live your dreams and be willing to speak your dreams out loud. And when I was a teacher, I was teaching Mandarin Chinese and theater in high school. I was fishing from the wrong pond. It was kind of like you have an inch of water and you're like, I'm just going to find a fish in there. And nobody wanted to talk about personal growth and development in that way. They didn't want to talk about how do I, make millions of dollars. Because as a teacher, you can see your entire paycheck over the course of 30 years when you sign up, because it's a step process. And I realized I would never be able to get $1 million gross over my entire career. And I was like, I'm in the wrong vehicle. I need to get around other people that want to improve the world and build their business. And that's one of the reasons why I appreciate you, and I appreciate so many different people in our community, because they encourage you to speak your dreams aloud. Right. And getting around the right people, that proximity to power is so key. So if there's like one last little bit of advice, there's something that I didn't ask you that you're like, man, I wish you would have brought this up because I have something here, or a story like, man, this is so good.
But we can go for 3 days here. Like I
can go for 3 days.
So like, and you're a speaker, you do these things. So like we can go for 3 days on all these different subjects, and we can come back. If your audience wants to put in questions, we can always come back and do a specific subject and type like that. We can do one just on speaking, one on investing, whatever it happens to be, and just go through some tips. So it is really, the biggest thing is to get clear on what you want, not what other people want. What do you want for you?
Love that.
Right. And most of the time we allow life or the universe or God or whatever you believe in to schedule our days and put us in directions versus us taking control of that. So, we run a group called the Entrepreneur Family. We get together 3 times a week, and part of that is just like, what do you want? What do you get clear? Who are the 3 people you need to connect with this week to make that happen? And we've got people rekindling relationships, because we all have hundreds and thousands of people in here, but we only talk to probably 20 of them. Right? We only talk to 20 of them regularly, annually, and we don't make a conscious effort to stay in touch with those other people. Those other people might have real estate deals for you. They might know somebody that they could refer to help grow your business. They might know somebody that wants to join your program. They might know somebody that, hey, you're looking for this. They might know somebody, but you're not in proximity and you're not top of mind. Right. And so we talk about a 3x3x3 or a 5x5x5, 5 phone calls to people, new people, 5 follow-ups, and then 5 people just to reconnect with. Right. That's the 5x5. And it's pretty simple just to do that and just remind them. Like we all like, oh yeah, when you hear somebody like, oh yeah, how's Bob doing? How's Jane doing? Oh yeah, like I haven't spoken to them in years. Why? Right. Like it's so easy in today's world just to send a quick text, to just send a quick thing, to do whatever it is, but yet we don't make the time for that. And if we don't make the time for that, then we lose those connections. Right. Like, then you lose relationships. I know people that, have known people like Alex Hermosi when he was first coming up, right? And all these people, but they didn't stay in contact, or they didn't respond to their messages. And now they won't respond to them, right? Like if you didn't talk to me when I was coming up, I'm not going to talk to you later, right? Like,
right.
And you lose those opportunities just because you didn't stay in touch or you didn't respond to something.
And I think part of that, what that just struck in my mind, was it's not how long the connection is necessarily, it's how often you have those connections. It's that spaced repetition that you learn in language learning. So I'm a linguist as well. I speak Mandarin Chinese and Spanish and working on other languages. But if you don't use the language and continually have connection with it, those connections soften and they soften and they soften until you're like, I don't even remember that word. It's on the tip of your tongue, but you're like, it's gone.
Right.
It's only when you use it consistently that your name becomes common in that other person's mouth,
Right.
that you can do great things with them in business and in life. So I appreciate, that was a great way to end here. How do people find you online, Hugh? How do people make sure they can continue to drink your Kool-Aid, right?
Sure. On most of the social media handles, it's at Hugh Z Wealth. So Hugh Z Wealth. But you go to hughzaretsky.com. What we'll do for everybody here is if you come through Brigham here, we will give you a 30-minute session, figure out, where you want to get started. If you want to get started with us on the 3 days a week training, if you want to get into our advanced real estate and business training, and then we do some coaching for people to help them. And then, of course, we have the fun boot camps, real estate investor boot camps. We go somewhere fun. The speakers boot camp. You want to be an international speaker, right? We're running that training as well. So I'll give you the calendar link, and you can share it with the people that reach out to you and be able to do that and see what's going on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hugh. I'm excited. Guys, go to the show notes. You'll get all that information. So you don't have to oh, where was that? They'll all be in the show notes under this in the description. So thank you so much again, Hugh, for being here. Always a pleasure to hear from you, my friend, and such a great mentor. And you're a leader of leaders. That's one of the reasons I like you. You know how to inspire people and to help them do the basics better. And I know the constant daily action, that's something that has consistently helped me. And it's even getting that reminder from you in Detroit. I was like, man, that is so good. So I hope you guys took some notes today. Oh, Hugh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, for you, one of the great things for everybody listening here with Brigham is he's one of the people that you tell them what to do and they apply it. And that's one of the keys to success, right? So I get a lot of people that talk, hey, I want to do this. Hey, I want to do this. But you actually go out there and apply it. And that's truly what we want for people, right? Knowledge is, everybody says knowledge is power. I don't believe that. Knowledge is good, but the action, right? That CDA is where that power comes into it, because there are people way smarter than me, way smarter than you, still doing things they don't like to do, right? Absolutely. So follow along here, hit the follow on his podcast here, hit the likes, hit the hearts, do the things so you can stay in touch with him, and then we'll all hang out together in the future.
Absolutely, because we like to do cool things with cool people, and Hugh is definitely one of the coolest people I know. So thank you so much, Hugh. I appreciate you, man. It's such a pleasure to share some heartbeats, and I know we'll touch bases again soon. So
sounds good.
Okay, take care.
Okay.
See you. Bye.